Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is, again, the one and only Rob McConnell. Welcome back, folks. We have a full show for you today. As you know, on this show here, Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. So let's get busy with the issue of politics real quick. Now, here's a quick update. The first subject we're going to talk about is the recent attempted assassination of the Palestinian Prime Minister, Rami Hamdallah. Apparently, the terrorist group Hamas has tried to kill him. Now, let me explain. The Islamic terrorist group Hamas, who is the military wing of the Islamofascist Muslim Brotherhood, and most people don't know that, but it's true, they have tried unsuccessfully to assassinate the Prime Minister of the Palestinian National Authority, known as PNA for short, Rami Hamdallah. Now, while Hamas predictably denies this, there's every indication that they were behind this recent attempt to bomb his convoy. Now, this is not only the view of Israeli authorities in a very rare show of unity with the government of Israel. The PNA has also agreed that Hamas is behind this failed murder attempt. Now, not coincidentally, Hamdallah and his entourage were on their way to inspect a new water treatment facility, which was being provided in part by Israeli officials to help ease Gaza's water crisis. Now, Hamas has been so inept at governing the Palestinians in Gaza that it only remains in power. Hamas only remains in power because it uses force and it kills its opponents. As a consequence, severe water shortages and contaminated water supplies have reached epidemic proportions in Gaza. Hamas has even destroyed its own sewage processing facilities, and it refuses to accept help from Israel. Now, that's plain stupid because Israel leads the world in recycling water. In fact, a little over half the water that Jews use in Israel comes from the Mediterranean Sea. Israel is the undisputed leader in water desalination plants. In fact, the Saudis put politics aside and they bought over 24 of these plants, and that's one of the reasons that the Saudis have been able to solve their water crisis years ago, because they ordered the water treatment plants from Israel. So the crisis in Gaza has reached such dire levels that a historic event was recently held, which brought the Saudis, Qataris, and other Arabs together to meet with Israeli officials, formally, to try to find common ground to improve conditions in Gaza. In other words, they're going around or through Hamas, depending on how you want to use the analogy. Now, predictably, neither the Palestinian National Authority, even though it would have been in their best interests, nor Hamas attended this event. They would rather see their people continue to suffer, as they always have, rather than find a genuine, fair, and honorable, peaceful solution with Israel. Now, Hamas's view remains the same as it always has been since its founding. It not only refuses to recognize Israel and give up terrorism, it says that Israel has no right to exist. And Hamas continues to promise to, quote, drive Jews into the sea, unquote, as they always have. Now, the PNA, Palestinian National Authority, is just as bad in that it demands a state called Palestine, but it refuses to allow Jews to live within its borders. Now, think about that for a moment, folks. If Israel had said, we're going to have a Jewish state called Israel, and Israel is a Jewish state. There's a reason it exists. It's a home for Jews. It's the only home for Jews, specifically for Jews. But what if Israel said, we're not going to have any Christians here. We're not going to have any non-Jews here, and especially no Palestinians. Israel would be absolutely deservedly condemned worldwide for having such a view. It's not right. And Israel does not have that view. But yet Mahmoud Abbas, who is in his 11th year or so of power of his original 4-year elected term, who lords over the Palestinian National Authority as its dictator, he says he will not allow any Jews inside an eventual state of Palestine. So one side is racist, and that's okay if you're a left-wing, la-la liberal, so-called progressive by today's standards, which are ridiculous. It's been my experience, having observed the progressive movement over the years, that they're really regressives today. They're intolerant. They're actually hate-driven, and we can talk about that in another episode. But yet Israel, they, of course, don't have that view, but if they did, they would be deservedly condemned as being racist. So there is a double standard here. The UN does nothing to force the Palestinians not to be that way, and trying to do anything with the PNA is essentially a lost cause. So instead, what the Palestinians want, and this includes both Hamas and the Palestinian National Authority, what they want is East Jerusalem to be the capital of a future state called Palestine. Hamas's view is a little more extreme. They said every inch of land in Palestine belongs to the Palestinians, no Jews at all. And it's ironic that they should choose Jerusalem, which is the capital city of Israel. It has been recognized as such recently by President Trump and governments like the Czech Republic and Ecuador. They're moving their embassies, as is the U.S., to the city of Jerusalem. Let's be honest, do your history, you can double check it, regardless of what you think about the conflict between the Palestinians and the Jews. We know for a fact from history that the city of Jerusalem was and became the capital city of a united Israel under King David in the year 1000 BC. Now that's 3,018 years ago. You can do the math. So for Palestinians who claim that the Jews of today who occupy their land, they are so ignorant of history and in denial of it that they even want a piece of the Jewish capital to claim as their own. I have to shake my head at the whole Palestinian thing because there is clearly a double standard here. And I'm speaking the truth here. I'm not biased on this issue. If you look at the history of Israel and what used to be called the Kingdom of Judea, it has been invaded and occupied, key word here, occupied, folks, by several different powers over thousands of years. We have to remember that roughly 1,000 years after King David ruled in Israel and united the Kingdom of Judea with Jerusalem as its capital, there were no Palestinians involved. They didn't exist, and Palestinians are a modern invention. The Roman Empire ruled that area around the time of Christ, and they, of course, were invaders. And what happened is the Ottoman Empire, which later became Turkey, also invaded what is Israel today. They occupied it for hundreds of years. They only quit occupying that land after the British in World War I, combined in part with the French, beat them in the war, and as a condition of ending that war, World War I, the Ottoman Empire was dissolved. The British and the French divided up the Middle East among them. So the areas known as Syria or Lebanon went to the French. The area which was called Palestine went to the British. So I have to point out the hypocrisy here when you have Muslims and Arabs saying that Jews are occupiers, but yet when they invaded and occupied for hundreds of years, that's okay. They don't call themselves occupiers. They say that's our land. So when they invaded this foreign territory, Israel, and took it over for hundreds of years, they're not suddenly invaders. But when the Jews returned back to the lands that were theirs for thousands of years, suddenly they're occupiers. You can't have it that way. Reality doesn't work that way. That is a double standard. That is hypocrisy among its worst. And that is the reality of the way the situation is today. It is not a coincidence that the flag of Palestine among the Palestinians, if you look at it compared to the flag of nearby Jordan, neighboring Jordan, you'll see that they're identical except for one feature. The little sunburst appears on the Jordanian flag, but it does not appear on the Palestinian flag. Well, why is that? Well, it turns out that before the name Palestinians was modern day invention, they were really Jordanian Arabs who occupied that area. Many of them sold their lands legally to Jews. And later, after World War II ended and the horror of the Holocaust was finally faced, this is the Holocaust unleashed by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, the world had a consensus at the UN level to go ahead and create an area, a country for the Jews to live in. And they said, well, send them back to where they'd always come from, modern country of Israel. And the reason that it was called Palestine, or Philistina, as its original name was, is because when Rome invaded Israel and broke it up, and the Jews lost the war, and the Jews were deported as slaves back to Rome, to strip the Jews of their identity, a Roman emperor changed it to Palestina. And the letter P does not even exist in the Arab alphabet. It's not there. So don't tell me and lie that it has always been Arab, it has always been Palestinian. There is no Palestinian language. There is no ancient Palestinian coinage. There's no ancient Palestinian pottery. There's no ancient Palestinian textbooks or great philosophical works. Can you name a Palestinian king that goes back hundreds of years? No, they never existed. It is a myth, a modern myth that happened after the 1967 war that Jordan lost against Israel. We will be back after this break, and we'll continue with Kal's Corner here on X-Zone Broadcast Network.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Welcome back to Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So let's quit talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Let's now move to Europe, and let's give you a quick update on what's been going on in the country of France. Now, France is rather interesting because it's politically divided and polarized, just like the United States is, maybe even worse. You have to remember that last year they had an election. Eventually, Macron won that election. But in the final round of voting, Macron was pitted against far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. Le Pen is a far-right extremist. She's a racist, a xenophobist, anti-immigrant, etc., etc. And the fact that she made it as far as she did in the final round of the elections proves that the French voters are disgusted with their two-party system, just like most Americans now want something other than the Democrats and the Republicans, because let's be blunt, those two parties are responsible, wholly responsible, for the fact that the United States, as the world's only superpower, continues to implode as a country. It is now $21 trillion in debt. That's probably a greater amount of debt than all the other nations combined. It's not doing as good as President Trump likes to fool people into thinking. And there's only two parties that have caused this, because there's only been two in power for hundreds of years there, and that is the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, what's happening in America is that the midterm elections are going to be coming up in November. The Democrats most likely will retake Congress, the lower house of the U.S. government, while they may even take the Senate. If the Republicans hold on to the Senate and the Democrats take the Congress, we will have what is called a divided house again, and the pendulum will just swing back the other direction. The Democrats will blow it. That's my prediction, because their record proves that they do that. And then it'll swing back to the Republicans, and this tired shtick will go back and forth, and things will get worse until enough Americans care about their country to rise up and say, you know, we need to really stop the two-party system. We need to go after something that actually works. Now, what I've just said here is nothing new for those who know me and have followed my reporting on this over many years. In fact, I will remind especially new listeners to this show that back when we were doing the broadcasts with Rob McConnell on the X-Zone Broadcast Network back in Europe when I lived in Prague for 10 years, I kept saying, even when the great Barack Obama was elected, that this bit about hope and change we can really believe in, these simplistic propaganda slogans that were defining his campaign, that this was not change we could believe in. This was really more chump change, and that Obama would not deliver on most of his key promises, and he did not. And of those he would deliver on, he would do it in such a way that would make things actually worse, or certainly weren't anywhere along the lines of what he had promised. And again, I want to emphasize that in my view, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I do report on it as a journalist. I have made a lot of predictions based on what I think is logic, not psychic powers. And I do have a track record that is pretty much undefeated, meaning have called a lot of these right. I predicted, for example, and said on old broadcast shows from Europe with Rob years ago that Obamacare would not be done the way he promised. It was not. And I even predicted, much to the chagrin and disapproval of my fellow journalists in India and abroad in the United States, that Donald Trump would win the election. In fact, I was practically the only journalist in India who said that. And the reason I went ahead and made that prediction is because I was talking to my fellow Americans. I'm American, and I understood their mood and frustration. And most Americans felt like, according to the polls, and they're right, that this was an election between two lousy choices. And this is exactly the same thing that has happened in France. It is the same thing that has happened in Germany, because the leaders in those countries who are pro-European Union just keep passing laws that most French citizens and most citizens in the other countries of the European Union, and there's nearly 30 of them, they don't agree with. And they're tired of these bureaucrats who live in their own ivory towers in Brussels making laws that affect them when they live in a different world entirely. And one of the key hot button issues is the massive influx of immigrants from war torn regions into countries like Germany, or in France, where most of them come from northern Africa, countries like Morocco, which are former French colonies. So France is trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. Most people who voted for Macron now regret it. And within the first year of his term, roughly, most French citizens are so frustrated with him, they want him out. He didn't last long at all. So, what are they doing now to try to redefine their society and go ahead and grow up and figure out what they want to be when they finally do grow up, if ever? And I predict they won't. Well, are passing a couple of laws which are rather interesting because they're typically French, and they're going to mess this up too. Now, anyone who's been to Europe will tell you that France is a rather liberal society, at least where it concerns things like partying and sex and things like that. Prostitution is legal there in France. But yet now the bureaucrats in the French government, who are pro-EU, of course, it's now illegal if a man whistles at a woman. In other words, if you see a beautiful woman walk by and you whistle at her or say, hey, beautiful, or you try to flirt or whatever, you better be careful now because it can cost you a fine and a citation by the police of several €100. Now, I want to be clear. I don't advocate at all for treating women in a way where it offends them. But I'll tell you, as an American who lived in Europe for 10 years, the key difference between women that I saw in Europe versus, say, their American counterparts, I remember there were times where, the way I was raised at least, that we were told that you open doors for women, you let them go first, etc. Be a so-called gentleman, all right? Well, I also remember a couple times in my life in the U.S. before I left America and moved to Europe for 10 years, that I went to open a door for a woman and she got mad at me and said, you think I can't open it myself? Well, no, I wasn't saying that at all. I was trying to be polite. Plus, I would open a door for anybody. I don't care if you're a woman. I'll do it for a man. Today, for example, there was a handicapped gentleman in a wheelchair. He couldn't get in this door. So what did I do? I went over to him, opened up the door so he could go in the store. That's the way people should be, in my opinion. Sex has nothing to do with it, or the fact they're women or men have nothing to do with it. They're human beings. So in America, where a lot of women try to be men or try to be ultra feminist, in Europe, and I've heard this from countless Europeans from many countries, they laugh at American feminists because they believe that women are women and men are men. And women in Europe, it's been my experience at least, that they're a bit more flirtatious, and they kind of expect you to say, wow, you look beautiful or whatever, where in America that can get you a lawsuit. And I realize I'm oversimplifying a little bit this issue, but I will tell you that if you ever go to Europe, especially in countries like France, in countries where the laws are very liberal and things like prostitution are legal and regulated and taxed, it's a very more open, loose society versus, say, the United States, okay? So now in France, against the chagrin of most of the French people, if you whistle at a woman or yell out your balcony, hey, you're beautiful, whatever, and I've seen this happen many times in Italy, where the Italian men do this to women, you can now be fined hundreds of euros and get a citation from police. And to show you how schizophrenic French law is, they are now finally, after centuries, defining the minimum age for consensual sex. It's now 15. Now you might say, wow, that's pretty young. Well, before you get on your high horse about that, you have to remember that in countries like the United States, it varies from state to state. In California, it's 18. If you have intercourse with a person who's under 18, it is a criminal offense. It's called statutory rape, and you can go to prison for it, even if both of you are in love, and one of you is over 18. So what the French have done is they've made it 15 now. that if you're 15, the girl or boy has the right to decide on their own. And the reason they had to define this law and settle this issue is there was a case that was famous in France where two men were accused of assaulting a girl who was under age 15. The problem was she agreed to it, and the issue is, do they really have the maturity to make such a consent? And in other countries, it is maybe 16 or 15, or believe it or not, as little as 13. It depends on the country. In India, for example, you can marry women who are age 15 or even earlier if both parents agree. I actually know some Indians who were married at age 5 by their parents, and they're still together, apparently happy as a couple as they grew up. So it varies from culture to culture, and now France has a 15 age legal age of consent. And now, of course, if you whistle at a woman in France, you can get in trouble. So France continues on its merry ways. It is still grappling with the issue of immigrants from the Muslim world. And if population dynamics continue, France will be the first country in Europe whose majority immigrants are Muslims, and it may very well be in 10 or 15 years Europe's first Muslim country. All right, we'll be back after this commercial break here with segment 3 here on Cal's Corner Radio on the X-Zone Broadcast Network.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, we've been talking about France and Europe. We started out by talking about the Middle East and Israel and the Palestinians. Let's continue with Europe for a little bit here in this segment, and then we'll get to segment 4 after the break. All right. We all know now, unless you've been living in a cave, that Russian President Vladimir Putin has won re-election in his country by a significant majority, over 70%. And of course, we also know that there was cheating in that election because there's videos that you can view on YouTube and all over social media that show that ballot stuffing and fraud has taken place. But even if you account for the fraud in the Russian elections, and we have to remember that it was the Russian dictator Joseph Stalin who murdered more people than Adolf Hitler did during World War II and the Nazis. He said famously that it doesn't matter who votes, what matters is who counts the votes, and in this case it's Putin's people. Now, this is not to say that Putin did not win the election legitimately. He actually did. On the other hand, let's be honest, he didn't really have any viable opposition. He's been very good at shutting down his opponents over the years. In fact, some of his opponents have a habit of turning up dead. And this is why we're going to talk about this. Congratulations to him for winning. He now gets another 6-year term, probably his last in power. And by the time that 6-year term expires, assuming he's still alive by then, he will have ruled longer than any modern era Russian leader. And of course, over the next 6 years, there's going to have to be the machinery put into place to groom a successor. Now, Putin is also in the news because there is a diplomatic spat that has taken place between Great Britain and, of course, Russia. And this has to do with the very serious issue that Russians are being murdered by Putin's henchmen, if not under the orders of Putin himself. There was a spy swap several years ago where a double agent was released by the Russians after getting caught, who had spied for the British on behalf of the British against Russia. He ended up settling in London. He is now in critical condition along with his daughter, and they were poisoned. And the poison has been identified as coming from Russia. It is a type of poison that only they make. It's military grade. And of course, before that incident, several years earlier, there was a famous murder that took place in London. A former KGB operative was killed by Putin's men using the radioactive substance of polonium. They were able to use sensitive equipment to trace the radioactive trail all the way back to Moscow. So there's no question that the Russians did it. Now, in the past, the British have been wimps. I'm going to be blunt with you about it. They have not shown their stiff upper lip in trying to deal with Putin. And that's shameful. It's inexcusable. And Putin is the kind of person who knows that if you're not going to teach him a lesson, then he's going to teach you a lesson. He's ruthless in that way, and he's very calculating. And any credible world leader is going to practice that dynamic. In politics and world affairs especially, if you can get over on another world leader, you tend to do that. That doesn't make it right, but it does happen. And we must remember that in Putin's case, he oversaw operations out of the former East Germany when communism fell in the USSR in 1991. I was in Europe at that time when that happened, and it totally disrupted what I was doing over there. Actually, I was going undercover at the Billy Meyer UFO cult when I suddenly had to leave and head into Germany to do some stuff over there related to it, which I explained in my book. But short version aside, Putin was the man in charge in Eastern Germany at that time, and he was a colonel in the KGB. So his job was to help destabilize the West. He's very good at it. And Putin has said openly that he misses those good old days. He views the collapse of the former USSR as the greatest calamity to face Russia ever in its history. Now, one can argue that that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think it's probably more accurate to say that the invasion of Russia by Hitler's Nazi Germany was a bigger calamity than the collapse of the USSR, but that is not Putin's view. He views that as the second worst tragedy. So he does miss the old empire days. He's also smart enough to know they're not coming back. But if you look at what he's done, especially in this last 6 years in office before he won re-election on the 18th, what he's done is he has tried to reconstitute at least parts of the old USSR. Look at his annexation of Crimea, which is illegal under international laws. The reason he did that is because the former sock puppet that he helped put in power, working with Paul Manafort, by the way, who used to be part of Trump's campaign. There's an irony there, but this happened years before he was involved with Trump. There was a leader put in power in Ukraine. He won that office legally, fair and square. And then when Ukrainians rose up against him because he refused to honor the commitments he had made with the European Union, he had even talked about joining NATO. Instead, he took a $12 billion loan from Putin in exchange for not pursuing those initiatives. The Ukrainian people, to their credit, rose up and in genuine democratic spirit, freedom and democracy, that type thing, they ousted him, put a new leader in power, and Putin got upset. So he immediately invaded and took over Crimea, annexed it illegally. It is now part of Russia again. And he decided he was going to destabilize eastern parts of Ukraine. And the reason Putin has done that is because he does not want Ukraine to be part of the European Union, and he doesn't want them to be part of NATO. Now, Putin has been upset for many years that NATO keeps pushing its borders eastward to the point where some countries are NATO members now that were not NATO members before, and NATO's military is on the other side of his border. It's common sense that that would bother him or any Russian leader. On the other hand, let's be honest, NATO by itself is not a threat against Russia. If war, God forbid, were ever to break out between NATO and Russia, Russia would win unless it went nuclear. The reason why Russia would win is because NATO is not strong enough to stand up against Russia. Russia outnumbers NATO 3-1 in tanks, for example, and tanks would be used across vast areas of territory very quickly. The Russian Air Force would be bigger than the combined air forces of many NATO powers. In fact, the only way NATO would be able to survive against a Russian onslaught would be if the United States got involved. And even then, the physics required to transport all that material and what would be hundreds of thousands of troops, planes, tanks, all that other wonderful stuff, and ships, it would take weeks and months to do that. In the meantime, Russia could just steamroll across Western Europe. So the only thing that keeps Russia from conquering Europe militarily is the fact that there are nuclear weapons to deter it. Now, Putin likes to boast about his nuclear weapons. He constantly rattles his saber, and he likes to threaten using nuclear weapons. But realistically, that's probably not going to happen, and it has to do with physics. Putin, for example, boasts that he has a 100 megaton nuclear weapon, a nuclear torpedo, if you will, that can destroy entire coastlines. It can destroy an area the size of the country of France or even the entire United Kingdom. Or it could obliterate the western coast of the United States with just 7 of these weapons. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. Everyone admits they're very powerful. Russia does have the most powerful nuclear bombs. But if Putin actually detonates one of those, guess what happens, folks? Radiation enters the atmosphere, the environment, and it goes back into Russia, and then it poisons his country. So you can't detonate a nuclear bomb because you can't control the fallout from it. And to cite just one example of what's really the obvious, look at the problem that happened with radioactive fallout when the nuclear reactor exploded at Chernobyl. What happened was Many cows, hundreds of them, if not thousands, had to be destroyed in Sweden, which is not anywhere close to the Ukraine, because the radioactive fallout went up into the atmosphere and ended up coming down in northern Europe, hundreds of kilometers away in Sweden. The cows ate the grass that was contaminated. It showed up as radioactive milk. The cows had to be destroyed. It hurt Sweden's economy. Look at a map. Look at where Ukraine is. Look at where Sweden is. That's how far that radioactive fallout went. And what would happen is the radioactive fallout would actually eventually circle the Earth. And since the winds blow any way that Mother Nature wants them to, if Putin were to detonate nukes, it would come back to contaminate his own country. So it's not going to happen, folks, unless anyone who launches a nuke has a death wish or is a suicide bomber type terrorist figure. So I predict what's going to happen is, yes, diplomats are going to be recalled and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, Britain is not going to do anything because it's Great Britain. Yes, there's going to be a show of solidarity between the European Union and France and the United States and Germany against Russia. USA is saying we support you as well. But notice that the British are not sanctioning the top oligarchs. Even the recent sanctions imposed against Russia for meddling in the election of the United States, specific elite oligarchs connected to Putin are not being targeted. Instead, lower hanging fruit is. At the end of the day, the gestures are meaningless because they are not viable deterrents. And when you have people who come from tyrannical regimes, from systems that used to oppress and deny people their rights, unless you really hit them with a real deterrent, they're just going to continue doing what they do. That's the way they're wired. And that's why we have dictatorships like North Korea. Until you have a credible alternative and punishment, they're just going to continue to run roughshod over you. All right, we'll be back after this commercial break for the final segment here on Kal's Corner Radio.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes. finds a locket or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, let's talk about the biggest loser in modern American politics, the one and only Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary brought her pity party to India. Don't be fooled by it, folks. Let's expose it for what it is, a fraud, okay? Now, once again, the biggest loser in modern American politics, this would be Hillary Clinton. She has brought her pity party now to India, where she was giving a speech and promoting her widely criticized Anything But the Truth book, titled What Happened. Now, as the only journalist in India who bothered exposing Hillary Clinton's falsehoods, outright lies in fact, in her book, then I wrote my own book called What Didn't Happen, Exposing Hillary Clinton's False Claims, Volume 1. You can buy this book on Apple's iTunes or the iBooks store. It's been out for several months now. I can say with certainty that I speak with authority on this subject. So if you believe Hillary Clinton's self-serving tale of woe concerning why it is that she was defeated by Donald Trump and lost the White House, then I've got a bridge to sell you in New York. Please don't be that stupid and don't be that gullible. So the first problem with Hillary's book is its title. Instead of it being What Happened with a question mark, Hillary tells us what happened only in her delusional version of events because facts don't matter. She's Hillary Clinton. Now, historically, it is beyond dispute that both Hillary Clinton and her more famous husband, this would be former President Bill Clinton, they have both long had problems telling the truth. Bill Clinton, after all, was not only indicted for lying, he was found guilty and impeached for perjury, which is legal speak for lying under oath. Now, when Hillary ran for president in 2016, she was repeatedly busted for lying about her email scandal. Even former FBI Director James Comey, as well as the Inspector General of the Department of State, issued blistering statements against Clinton. To cite just one example, since others can easily be found on Google if you bother to look for them, the Inspector General noted, as previously exposed by me covering this as a journalist, that Hillary Clinton had falsely claimed that she used her private email server because she had, quote, permission, unquote, to do so. Now, the Inspector General's investigation proved that not only was this not true, the IG also proved that Clinton never even bothered to ask for permission, and if she had bothered to do it, that is, asked for permission, it would never have been given to her because it broke the laws. So Clinton dismissed the IG's conclusions as being, quote, speculation, unquote, which again is another lie. So here's just a partial list of the lying excuses that Hillary has given for her loss to Donald Trump. This list, which I'm going to read to you in just a moment here, is actually beyond pathetic. The FBI and its director, James Comey, Putin and the Russians, low info voters, translation, stupid people. See, this is a thing that bothers me, being an American, about Americans, is you have this politically correct English. So instead of calling somebody stupid or uninformed or ignorant, they're now called low information voters, okay? So she blames low info voters, WikiLeaks, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the New York Times, which was ironically pro-Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Netflix for daring to air series that were a documentary that exposed Hillary, Democratic National Party, she blames her own party, she blames the Republicans, she blames white voters, she blames Twitter, she blames the U.S. Supreme Court, and she even blamed in India, she talked a lot about this, men who told their women not to vote for her. Can you imagine that, folks? She blames Facebook. She blames the invisible state, whoever they are. She blames anti-American forces. She blames white women because Hillary lost the vote among the majority of white women. And that's ironic since Trump was and has bragged about groping women. She blames the Electoral College, even though she didn't have a problem with it when other Democratic candidates won. See, this is the hypocrisy of the Democrats. They don't like the Electoral College system when they lose, like what happened in the year 2000 with Al Gore. They love it when they win. They hate it when they lose. She blames bad polling. She blames women haters. These are women who hate the idea of a woman being president. She blames women protesters. She blamed the media, even though they were overwhelmingly for her. She blamed Macedonia and the so-called data farms and trolls online. And she blames voter suppression. Now, in Hillary's twisted view, everyone is guilty except for her. Now, to be honest, I'm surprised Bigfoot and aliens haven't been used as her excuse yet for her loss, because like a good fish story where the fish keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger each time the fisherman or the hunter recounts his tale, this is what's happening with Hillary Clinton. So what happens is her pity party is so shameful that Hillary has said, quote, "I was the victim of a very broad assumption that I was going to win," unquote. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, Hillary herself believed she was going to win as well. In fact, she was so certain that that is the reason she didn't give the speech that night when she found out she lost, and instead sent her sock puppet out, Podesta, to tell everybody, we're not done yet. Just come back tomorrow. We'll have an announcement. Well, everybody knew what that announcement was going to be. We surrender. We lost. Trump won. So Hillary was so certain she was going to win. So were other so-called experts like the New York Times, that they even said there was as much as a 91 to 95% certainty that not only was she going to win and beat Trump, that it would even be an electoral college landslide, and it absolutely was not. So Hillary had always run with a sense of entitlement. That's why she was nicknamed Queen Hillary. Because what happened, the short version of which is this: after the Monica Lewinsky scandal, a deal was cut between the Clintons. In exchange for them not divorcing, basically Hillary dumping her philandering husband, Bill Clinton, a deal was made that they would leave political life, at least the White House, because they had to. His second term was expiring. She would carpetbag it off to New York and do exactly what Senator Robert Kennedy had done decades earlier. She would live in New York, run for Senate, essentially against no serious opponent. The party would assure her basically of a victory because of her name. She would put in just enough time as a senator to appear to be respectable. And her real eye the entire time was on winning the White House and getting back into the White House. And her husband would go from being former president to first dude, I guess. So what happened is exactly this. Hillary did run essentially without a credible opponent. She won that race for Senate. She became a senator. And then she immediately ran for president as quickly as she could. But a guy named Barack Obama destroyed her plans. He beat her. And he even beat her in the first caucus in Iowa, where she came in third. She came in third because she took a victory in Iowa as a certainty, and Iowa voters had other ideas. She placed third, and her campaign never recovered. And then, knowing that she's a sore loser and that she would spend the next 4 years plotting against Barack Obama, the way that Obama sidelined her and could effectively guarantee that he could watch her and watch his back as well, protect his back, he threw her a political lifeline and asked her to be Secretary of State. And what Hillary did is she traveled around the world, broke all the travel records of any previous Secretary of State. You'd have a hard time naming a major thing that she accomplished because she really didn't do much at all. Can you name 5 top wonderful, groundbreaking things that she did? The answer is no. What she did do, however, was travel the world, meet a lot of leaders, pose for a lot of photographs, shake a lot of hands, eat a lot of foreign dishes, did a lot of photo ops, and of course the money, hundreds of millions of dollars of it, came pouring into the Clinton Foundation. Coincidentally, we're led to believe, even though the Clintons have been masters at finding legal loopholes to engage in what is called pay-to-play politics. And after she lost to Donald Trump, look at the donations that have poured into the Clinton Foundation since then. They've been almost non-existent compared to the high times when she was Secretary of State. So what Hillary did is she was running essentially a shadow government while she was Secretary of State. She behaved for those 4 years to build up the machinery so that she could run for president again the moment that Obama was done in the White House, and that came back to haunt her. So one of the things that Hillary has lied about is she said that voter suppression in the state of Wisconsin was responsible for her losing that state. That's a lie, folks. There is no evidence that voter suppression played a role in her losing Wisconsin. Hillary lost Wisconsin because most Wisconsin voters never liked her. She never won Wisconsin when she campaigned against Barack Obama. She never won it against Bernie Sanders, even though she had effectively won the nomination. He still beat her. The governor of Wisconsin refused to endorse her, endorsed Obama instead, and she didn't even bother to campaign in a state she'd never won, Wisconsin in this case, when she ran against Trump. Now, Hillary has apologized now for saying that she didn't mean to offend anybody when she said that women listened to their men and decided not to vote for her because they want to do what their men says. Well, Hillary did mean to offend people. Her apology is not sincere. She didn't actually come out and formally say she was sorry. She never does that. You have to remember that she called Trump supporters deplorables. Now, you can't make that term up. That is a term that is used to hurt people. Well, I got news for you. I know many people who voted for Trump. They're not racist. They just didn't like Hillary. And that's why Trump is in the White House. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Kal's Corner. We'll be back next week with another show. My name is...
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com, or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.